Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cap and Gown. I'm Rachel Phillips Buck, VP for Student Success at Ferris Resources, joined this afternoon by Matt Boisvert, our president. Hey, Matt.
Hi, Rachel.
How's
I was
it going?
watching you in the green room. Just your very expressive
I was telling
gestures.
Bailey the story of how I fall asleep listening to podcasts in my library. I listen to like Dateline, so murders put me right to sleep. But sometimes if I don't set my timer, like my sleep timer, it'll go through my library, and I have Cap and Gown in my library. So I hear like the first 2 seconds of that music, and I'm like instantly awake and like, what's our topic? What are we talking about? And then I have to listen to like 2 more murders to get back into like.
That would be startling.
It's
I'm on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this is our 6th episode of our 5th season. There's a couple of exciting things going on. First of all, it is the first of the month, October. October is my favorite month. I think it might be Z's favorite month. It might be Bailey's favorite month too. There's just something about, yes, it's like the real beginning of fall. So like everything gets cooler. You can wear your cute sweaters. You're not having to stay inside all the time because it's 112. So, but related, is there an earthquake? Are you having an earthquake?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
October 1st is when we talk about the rhythm of the academic year. I hope that you guys are getting Z's newsletter around the rhythm of the academic year, because that's laying out for you all of the things that are happening for your students and your staff and your faculty during each month, but also giving you a template that you can use to tell the rest of your campus about that. So we love that newsletter. I think it's a really great addition to the ways that we're resourcing our clients. Let me tell you about October.
Yeah.
The theme for October is reality check. Because students are starting to have roommate problems. They are really asking questions about whether or not they fit in. So they're like having a little bit of social anxiety. Like they've been there long enough that they kind of are understanding how it's going to go. Love relationships from home are starting to break up. Pressures from parents and family to do well academically. So we're getting like our first test, and they're kind of feeling a little bit stressed about that. This is the hardest month in the first semester because the new is kind of over, and now we're entering into like, but for
reality,
now you're here. First grades, midterm exams, student issues are escalating and growing in number. So we're just finding all of those things. And then homecoming for a lot of schools is coming up in this month. So that has its own set of challenges. So we're thinking for our schools about stoplight surveys. We're thinking about midterms, making sure we're getting holds removed. And that whole registration process is October is the
going to kick off soon. It's wild.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So that's exciting. October reality check.
Well, Rachel, I just went up this weekend and saw my daughter at Texas Tech and did all the things, just subtly checking in, making sure she's hit the transition. She's starting to feel integrated, right? Like all of these things. It was just, I'm really proud of her. She's doing a great job, but it is definitely where it's become very real. This is where I live. This is who I live with. This is who I'm starting to hang out with. And these are the classes and all that.
Yeah. The other thing, Matt, is we've just been really heartbroken about the weather and the flooding this last week. I think we have about 8 different schools that we serve that are affected by the floods, and all over, right? Tennessee, North Carolina,
South Carolina.
So we're just thinking about those schools. And I was just reading an article just about how parents can't get in touch with their students, how terrifying is that? Like we don't know where they are because we don't have cell service and all those things. So definitely thinking about those schools. And also I think about, like, so often in higher education, you have people who are in student affairs and academics who are trying to show up and care for their students at the same time that their houses are flooded or they're experiencing turmoil in their families. And so I think calls to the forefront what a difficult job it is to be there for your students when you also are having hardships. So we're thinking about all of them as well.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Our theme for this year, which means we just have a few more months of this theme, although I love it. I think we should maybe keep it for a little bit longer. Our theme is curiosity, which means that we not only tell you about some curious facts coming out of our National Geographic book, but also we tell you about our last 5 Google searches. And we have a treat today because Dr. Sherry Woosley is going to join me. And you reminded her this morning, make sure you have your Google searches. So not only do you get to see in our brains, you get to see into her brain as well. So we'll look forward to that when she joins a little bit. So Matt, what do you want to do? Curiosity book first or Google searches?
Sure. Yeah. I know how much you love food. So I picked the curiosity book.
Okay.
The topic is about food. However, food is more than just for eating. These are things you maybe never thought of.
It's weird because I think the definition of food is something you eat, but okay, go ahead.
It's for more than just eating.
Okay.
One, you can use rye bread to wipe smudges off of walls.
Because you might not have a paper towel, but you for sure have some rye bread sitting around. Okay.
Some old... Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is something I might have figured out when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Like, whatever's handy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
All right, banana peels. A banana peel can be used
To shine things.
to shine silver. Yeah.
Bam! Okay, all right.
All right, I'm glad that got you excited there. And then lastly, all right, let's say you're out and spent way too much time out in the sun. Cold plain yogurt can be used to relieve sunburn pain.
Okay, cold plain anything can be used to relieve sunburn pain. Just put something cold on. Doesn't matter what it is. You know?
Well,
I don't love that one.
All right.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I clearly picked the wrong page. You're offended because food is to eat. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, here are my Google searches. Are you ready? The
Sure,
monarch butterfly path, because we actually get monarchs in Abilene and we've just started to see them. And I owe you an apology because you said they start in Maine. And I was like,
Maine.
that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. They do start in Maine. They start in southern Canada and Maine. And
Yeah.
go all the way down to Mexico.
And my backyard is like a sanctuary for them.
And
It's amazing.
Monarchs only ever migrate once. So they're born, they migrate, and then they die, which is amazing because scientists are like, how do they know how to go?
Where to go.
Yeah,
Right.
pretty cool. Okay, second, is Gorgonzola a blue cheese? Because I was at a restaurant the other day and I said, what kind of blue cheese is this? And then the waiter was like, I'll check. And then he came back and he's like, it's not blue cheese, ma'am, it's Gorgonzola. And then I had to Google, are those the same thing? And they are.
They are.
The history of Wendy's Frosty, which is pretty
Oh,
interesting. It's
I
created
love,
soft serve from, I think, Michigan, maybe. I forget where it was created, but there's a whole story around that.
Okay.
The average height of women in the United States, which is 5'3".
3.
And Hurricane Helene, is it Helena? Is that how they're saying it? Hurricane
think-
Helena tracker, Helene.
Lame.
Because we were in Knoxville when that was happening and we were trying to figure out if we are going to be able to fly out. All right, what have you got?
All right. Well, while we were in Knoxville, I told you I love the state of Tennessee's flag. You know, like why? Why are there 3 stars? And I had to look it up, and so learned a lot about the flag, the
Mhm.
Tennessee flag. The 3 stars are the 3 geographic regions. However, there was a big to-do about you can't have 2 of the 3 on the same level. Like you can't, I don't know. They have to be equidistant and rotated.
No
a certain-
power. Like you're not assigning power to anything.
Yeah. We're not saying 2 out of 3 are better than the other.
Yeah.
So there's that. Also, you're gonna catch a little theme here. Who is the fastest football player miles per hour? This is just cool. Bullet Bob Hayes, which is Dallas Cowboy, and he ran in the Olympics. Oh yeah, Bullet Bob ran 22 and a half miles an hour. Okay.
That's a little faster than I could run.
So then I Googled Usain Bolt's top speed. So he averaged 23.35 miles an hour, almost a full mile an hour faster than Bullet Bob Hayes. However, the fastest between the 60 and 80 meters of his 100-meter dash, he was going to 27.8 miles per hour.
Wow, that's
Wow.
incredible.
Okay. And then I wanted to know the top speed of a camel.
Okay. This is why we shouldn't do this, Matt, because people are just, they're so
This
weird.
is interesting because did you know the one hump camel runs a lot faster than the two hump camel? A lot.
Really? Okay.
The one hump camel can run 40 miles an hour. The two hump camel can run 25 miles an hour, which means Usain Bolt is faster than a two hump camel.
I see.
See where I was? You see what I did?
Whole trip there. Uh-huh.
Okay, and then my last is Tommy John surgery, because after that Dallas Cowboys New York Giants game, I was like, those referees are going to need Tommy John surgery for all the flags they're throwing.
Funny.
15 flags thrown in that game.
Yeah, that's
So
too bad. All right, thank you for that glimpse into what's happening in your brain for the last week. And
there
now,
you
for
go.
the State of the Union.
It didn't even bother you
You're a little-
that I threw out a little Giants, Cowboys
not.
game.
Nope, it didn't. That's because I've already moved on to the this is how much I love our listeners. I've already moved on to the United States Government Accountability Office's Department of Education preliminary results of the FAFSA rollout. If you're joining us live, I just want to show you, this is what the report looks like. I printed it. Doesn't that look like good reading? It's 37 pages
Okay.
of everything that was wrong with the FAFSA rollout. So I'm bringing this up for two reasons. The first is because I was reading a lot of articles this week about how people in financial aid felt like they were being gaslit. Like they were like, hey, this was really, really horrible. And I don't understand why it went like this. It feels like somebody should have known it was going so badly and told us earlier.
Yeah.
And they're like, the Department of Education is like, no. It's just, who knew? Well, they did know. That's what this report says. So here are the relevant points that I think just underpin what a wreck. Okay. First of all, in the first 5 months of the rollout, there were 5.4 million calls to the help center or to the support center to get help on that. 5.4 million calls. Of those, 4 million were never answered. So 3/4 of the calls that went to try to get help, nobody answered. It just rang and rang and rang. People were on the phone for 4 hours, waiting, never got answered. Okay.
Wow.
Second, they knew in August of 2022 that they were not going to make their December deadline. They did not say anything about it for 7 months. So they just didn't tell anyone, kept quiet. And then they're like, oh, by the way, sorry, we're going to miss it. So that's a wreck. But Matt, the other piece that is really remarkable about this report is that they awarded this contract for the new FAFSA processing system. They encountered issues that led to delays. We know that. In September of 2023, the FSA, which is the federal, I forget what it's called, federal
Student aid,
federal student aid, decided to move the delivery of 25 key requirements to December of 2023. They later said, actually, never mind. 18 of those 25 requirements, we're not going to actually address them. Just scrap them for right now. One of those requirements not included was the capability to determine final aid eligibility and distribute that eligibility information to schools. So they're like, we're just not going to do that one.
Meh.
Okay. Next, they also identified numerous defects after deploying the system. Specifically, in documentation on March 6th, the agency identified 55 defects, including 7 that were unresolved but categorized as critical. For example, one critical defect resulted in FSA initially overestimating students' aid by erroneously excluding their family's assets from the calculation. So basically, one critical thing was they did it wrong. They couldn't get a right calculation. Okay. The last one I'm going to tell you about is that they had guidelines that review would be conducted before any development begins, right? Which, Matt, you and I know this. When we're talking about pushing out a new feature, our developers don't start working on it until we see the mock-ups and we approve it and we talk about how it's going to work. Otherwise, they do a bunch of work and then you're like, that's not actually going to work for us. That's not what we needed, right? Well, in this case, there was no testing for, let's see, the agency did not conduct this review until more than a year after development had started. And they were like, hey, you can start testing this even though 26 of the 48 readiness indicators were not complete. So they didn't start early to say, this is what we want you to build. And then when they were testing it, it was like, it's not really built. So I think what's most distressing about this is it's one thing if something terrible happened and what a wreck, but it's another thing when you're looking at the sort of post-mortem on this and you're like, all of these things were not done, which is why we're in the situation we're in, right? So,
well, I'm thinking about our schools. I'm thinking about, like you said, like the financial aid counselors or those who are having to do the work and try and make like a recovery plan for the school, and to get all of the award letters out, and the amount of pressure that put on, in particular, our smaller schools. I mean, we can see it in their faces, right? And when you look at Texas and FAFSA applications, we're down 10%, 9% nationally. It's very distressing, especially like you said, that they knew about it and just were like, And the whole reason why we're having to fill this thing out, we don't really want to do that part either. That's hard.
Well, this afternoon is when they are starting Beta 1, which is 6 community-based organizations. It's about 1,000 students are going to try out all of the new FAFSA that they've tried to fix. This is going to go through December, and then they're going to do a couple of rounds of testing. So it's like these small populations so that hopefully they can get it, which they should have done in the beginning. But we're starting now so that the goal is that everyone will be done by December 1st, and then they can roll it out to everybody. So that's what's happening with FAFSA. Okay, I have another article for you coming out of Higher Ed Dive, which is about how you can make your college welcoming to transfer students. Matt, you and I have done this work for so long, but this article I think is really, really helpful in thinking about some things that you and I have not discussed before for transfer students. So 16% of community college transfer students, only 16% earn a bachelor's degree if they transfer to a four-year college. Only 16%, okay? So this article is saying, first of all, how do you give your transfer students registration priority? A lot of schools do seniors, juniors, sophomore, freshmen, right? So juniors get to pick their classes first. And there are a lot of schools that have transfers after freshmen. Well, when you do that to a transfer student, then all their classes are full, they can't get what they need, they're in trouble, right? So best practice is you put them in with their classification. If they transfer in as a junior, they should be registering with juniors because it's really important for them to be able to get their classes.
Yeah.
Other colleges are packaging financial aid offers for the entire first year class before they're looking at transfer students. So by then your money is gone. You need to figure out a way to integrate those transfer students into your packages. Asking questions like, can a transfer student reasonably complete every required course in 2 years? So, for some of our small schools, our faculty are doing 4-year rotations of upper level courses. So you might come in and have 3 years before you would have your upper level courses that you need. So just those kinds of questions, like very nitty gritty, how are we going to make sure that our transfers are getting what they need? Even things like internships. When they come in as a junior, they should be getting internships, right? We're not going to wait. They should be treated like a junior, not pushed off. So pretty interesting. Important. All right. I've never heard of this before, but there's a school, Moorpark College, which is talking about academic renewal notice initiative. This is really fascinating to me. So at Moorpark, students are eligible for academic renewal, which is where they don't count a class grade in your GPA. So you're eligible for this if you achieved a below C grade more than 12 months ago, up to 24 credit hours of work if your GPA has risen in that time. You can't do that for your course requirement degrees. So like if it's something you need for your major, you can't replace it. But for general classes, you can say, I don't want that to count in my GPA. And then they just take it off and it helps you recover your GPA, which is really, really interesting.
Without having to retake the course, right? So that's the key, is it's like, okay, you've proven you're a better student now. You got it together as you talk. I mean,
are you laughing about me and my courses?
I'm just curious what your, undergrad GPA could have been. 24 hours.
Because Matt, I know you're making fun of me, but for real, I have faculty members whose syllabus said, if you don't come to class in the first week, like, at least twice in the first week, we'll drop you. And then they wouldn't drop me. And then I would get a 0 for the course. And I would have a terrible GPA, and I'd be like, I freaking never went to that class. Like, your syllabus says you're going to drop me. I didn't have a lot of self-agency, so I didn't go fight with them. But I think it's a great way to help our students recover if they've had some hard semesters, right?
So what I like about this article is it's a policy that's been around for a while.
Yeah.
What has changed is that the school and some advisors at the school were like, hey, let's do a nudge campaign or let these students know. And so then they started to track like, wow, we were able to help this number of students. So like half of the students we reached out to who were eligible responded. And actually, yeah. So I love that part, because all of that to say that at your campus, you may have a policy. It's in the catalog or whatever, and no one knows about it. And so you thought you were doing good work because you set it up, or someone did 10 years ago, thought they were doing good work, but no one knew that's there. So if you have those kinds of opportunities to engage your students and really give them something helpful, like dropping a course that doesn't really matter, like going back and dropping my pickleball course, for instance,
Short of music. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. This article is worth the long read. It's called To Understand the Future of Higher Education, Look to the Past of Healthcare. So this author, Natalie Schwartz, draws a lot of comparisons between I think she's the one who compiled this, but Ricardo Aziz is the person who wrote it. So he said, 40 years ago when I was a physician, I knew that we provided more art than science, sacred and special and immeasurable. When we performed healthcare, they're like, now we're going to start measuring what you do here. They're not measuring empathy. They're not measuring wisdom, experience, expertise. They're measuring patient satisfaction, ROI, patient outcomes. And he's like, this is very similar to what's happening in higher education now, where we're not talking about all of the experience of higher education, but instead we're talking about when you graduate, how much can you earn? Not intellectual development, civic engagement, quality of life, happiness, all those other things that we would associate with college degrees. He also talks about the difference of where you receive these things. So it used to be in healthcare that you would go to the hospital or you'd have your primary care physician, and that's where you would get most of the support and care. Now, though, we have standalone centers. You can have online medicine. Same thing for higher education, the difference between being in the class and our online offerings. And then also a lot of really small hospitals who were seen as the bread and butter for smaller towns are bought up by bigger hospitals, and then they own them. And that's kind of the presence, or they merge them or they close them. They just say, you're going to have to go to the big city if you need hospital care. So really interesting to go down that line and think about it. And his conclusion is, you have to have big thinking change. We can't stop acting like everything's going to be the same. We've got to think about it in terms of transformational issues in healthcare. And
don't get me started on the hospitals in smaller towns being bought out by larger conglomerates.
Same thing with news, right? Like news stations, same thing, newspapers.
Oh, well, yeah, for sure. But I think to your point, just reflecting on, okay, so healthcare is what it is now. and here's how it evolved into what it is now.
Yeah.
What part of this would we want to have happen in higher education? And if we don't want some of these outcomes, then what do we do about that, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just, it calls us to really be deep thinkers. All right. AI, always on the table. Elon just put out what I think to be a really, really helpful student manual for did I say EI? AI?
You said AI.
Okay, for AI. So it talks about ground rules for your class, using the highest ethical standards. Make sure you can answer yes to these questions before you use AI in your classes. It has a great section about here are the big 6 generative AI tools, and here's what you should use for image generation. So this is a really great manual to give to your students. Highly recommend downloading it. It also has 5 guidelines for a good prompt. So here's how you're going to order what you ask, and here's this is interesting, Matt. Their basic prompt formula is declare a role, give a context, create a task, and then specify a format. So helpful. Yeah.
Really
I really
great.
like that. In companion with that, there's an opinion piece that says this is a great essential AI manual, but we skip over some of the philosophical issues in this manual. And this faculty member is kind of frustrated about the push for this framework that prioritizes rapid and uncritical adoption of AI over a more deep, thoughtful approach where we're thinking about practical and ethical issues of it. So I think those 2 things in companion would be really interesting to read. Finally, have you heard about this? The UNLV quarterback, Matthew Sluka, who has led the school they've played 3 games. He's won all 3 of them. He just redshirted himself.
UNLV is ranked number 25 in the nation right now.
He just redshirted himself because he said before he came to play here, they promised they would pay him $100,000 and they didn't. And so now he's like, I've played 3 games. I'm going to redshirt. I'm going to have all 4 years of eligibility. And I'm not going to play. Good luck to my teammates, but I'm done playing for you. So again, unintended consequences of what's going on. It's really interesting. There's a lot we could say about it, but it's just these little news nuggets, right? That we're trying to understand this whole process of the transfer portal and name likeness. What is it? Name, image, likeness.
Yeah.
So interesting. I mean, I know he didn't do this, but it's an interesting tactic where you would go to a school, win all your games, and then be like, remember how you promised to pay me $1 million? And they're like,
There's 3.
you didn't do that? And you're like, okay, then I'm not playing anymore, and I'm just going to keep my eligibility. Yikes. Yep. Okay.
All right.
Thanks for joining me for State of the Union.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring in Dr. Sherry Woosley now. You guys are well familiar with her, the Director of Analytics and Research at Elantra.
Hey.
Sorry, that was a long State of the Union, but the FAFSA craziness is just craziness.
I actually really enjoyed listening, so I'm good.
Okay.
Not to the FAFSA part. I was more interested in the others. FAFSA breaks my heart.
I know. It's really rough. Well, I am going to put you on the spot and ask you about your Google searches. So tell me what is in your list, ma'am.
Well, I'm laughing because, it looks a little weird. My first or most recent one was what's on the crumble cookie menu this week.
I like it. Seafood. Yeah.
It's a bad habit of mine that I adore. I had the 10-day weather forecast because our air conditioner broke and I want to know if that's going to be okay or not.
No.
My husband fixed it, but we still got to get it replaced. So,
Sorry.
How much do I need to be ready to run to the coffee shop? I had best times for an Alaskan cruise.
Oh,
year because I am looking ahead and thinking of, I don't know if I told you this, the phrase I have in my head for when my last kid goes off to college, it's called Empty Nest Freedom Fest Tour.
Ooh, I
got to figure out what we're doing for our Empty Nest Freedom Fest, and that's one thing on the list.
Sherry, we gotta buy that domain.
I know, I probably should. Somebody told me I should buy the domain, buy a and create the blog and do the little, like do the road trip tour.
Yeah,
But
for
anyway,
sure.
I have fresh fruit deliveries in Boston because my college kid wants fresh fruit.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's kind of fun. And then I had thrift stores in Denver because I remember seeing one, and I did find it. It is a thrift store, which I kind of love, that has a taco bar and drink bar in the thrift store.
What?
I know. And my mother loves thrift stores. I like tacos. Sounds like a great place to go visit.
You know, that reminds me, I'm sorry, I know we're doing a lot of chit chat, but that reminds me of Matt has had an idea for a laundromat that's like a taco bar, margarita bar where you can go and do your laundry and then just like sit. I love it. I think those are I'm behind that. So I'm gonna have to put that on my list of things I've got to go see. That was good.
I'll let you know. I'm going to go see it hopefully next week. I'll let you know if it's worth
Okay.
it.
All right. Sounds good. So let's get to our topic. I feel like, I don't know if it's because it's October. I don't know. I feel like we're a little bit off the rails, but you brought this topic up and I am super excited for us to dive into it.
Yeah.
Primarily because I think it is so helpful to our listeners in a very practical way. So let's introduce it. This is the idea of job crafting.
Yeah.
Can you define job crafting for us and just tell us, like, why is it relevant for us to talk about on a podcast about higher education?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go to the like, I don't know, one of the primary beginning articles about job crafting, because I think it frames it up beautifully. It's Snirsky and Dutton, 2001. I have the reference. But anyway, the key is they went into their study thinking that jobs are socially crafted activities. How often does your job description actually match what you do?
Yeah.
And what you do is what they wanted to see was, how do people enter into a work environment and craft out their job, or in what ways do they do it? And that's where the concept was born. But it's that notion of, what are you doing around your job, in your job, whatever, to make the job what it is and what it becomes, right? Because I don't know, my job description, I don't know if I have one anymore.
Jerry, I said the same thing. I said to Matt, do I have a job description? He's like, I don't think so.
No.
So I love what you're saying is this juxtaposition between what we write in the job description and then what the person who inhabits that role makes it because of who they are, what they like, what they're interested in, what their gifts are, right? Is that a fair?
Yeah. And if you need like a concrete example of this, have you ever had a longer term employee leave, and suddenly it's like you've got this weird puzzle piece gap and you're trying to find who's going to fit this puzzle piece, because in essence, they have crafted a job based on who they are, what their personality is, what their skills are, what their relationships are, that isn't a very straightforward job.
Yeah.
And we have maybe not recognized it through the years, and now we're stuck with this weird puzzle piece shaped gap, and we're like, how do I fill this?
Yeah, for sure. And the question is, I mean, in some cases, like, is that because that person liked that job, or is it because that thing needed to be in the job description, right? So unhooking those things and saying they did it that way because they liked that, versus, no, that's actually, we need to put that in the job description. We've got to have a person who can do that, right? Super interesting.
The other thing, I think, to put it in context as well, is there was a lot of research in the late, I don't know, 80s and 90s, and even early in the 2000s around work redesign and trying to make jobs work better for people. But work redesign comes at this issue from a top-down approach. What could the business do? What could your manager do to give you more autonomy, give you more freedom, those kinds of things? That is, I guess, contrasted. Job crafting is, what do I do in my position? It's not what they do to me or for me. It's what do I sort of craft out and morph out. And I like that agency part of this.
I do too. I think especially in higher education, where the feedback so often is, a lot of things are out of my control. right? I don't get to set my hours, or I don't get to decide whether or not I am going to do orientation. Like, there's just a lot of things out of my control that I can't exert some influence on. Setting up your days in the ways that we're about to talk about, setting up your jobs, that is a thing that you 100% can control in terms of what's important to you, right?
Yeah. I would also add one other like kind of crazy thing is oftentimes when I see people talk about job crafting, or I see people talk about it on podcasts and other things, they are often talking about it from this framework of how do I add experiences to my job to get me promoted, to get me raises, to get me whatever. And that is not based on the theory or the concept, because if it's only about adding, it's actually not very helpful in higher ed right now.
Right.
So I think it's really important when we say job crafting, it can be about expanding, but also contracting and get rid of things, morphing them, switching them, whatever it is to make the job work better for yourself. So I think it's really important that this is not about finding opportunities so you can get promoted. This is about making that job work better for you.
So Sherry, something I want to point out here is that my second career in higher education was around career counseling. And one of the things that I think is so helpful for us to articulate, because people know it, but they don't say it out loud, is that there are things that I love to do that you would be like, I'd rather die, right? And vice versa. When I was working at a bakery one time, I've told this story before, but the worst job is mopping. The worst job. It like hurts your back. You've got to so you have to sweep and then you have to mop. And one time I was doing this job because I was the manager. And so I was like, it's the worst job. I'm going to do it. And the girl I was working with was like, how come you always mop? And I'm like, are you kidding? It's the worst job. Like I'm like being a servant here, right? I'm doing it. And she said, I hate sweeping. I hate it. Mopping is the best job. I love it so much. Can I please do it? And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we had this talk because I hate mopping. I'm just trying to be helpful. Well, that's a very concrete example of job crafting, where when we analyze like this thing that I'm doing makes me miserable.
Yeah.
You have people around you who would love to take on that thing and find it joyful. Yeah. And that's the kind of articulation that I think we need, because sometimes we do feel like if I hate it, everyone must. It's a burden to say, I don't want to do this part.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, you love it, please go. Take it over and do what
you were being so helpful and lovely, and she's looking at it going, but
right.
I like that.
Why do you always get the best job, Rachel? And I'm like, you can have it, I promise. So I love that. How do we find those places where we're like, more of this, less of this, please, and have those conversations with other people? Okay. So one question about this is how do you think this helps in higher education, where we're talking about low morale, people feeling taxed, people feeling a lot of burnout? How is this a helpful thing for us to uncover?
Well, I think you hit a couple of things. There are many, many, many of us who are super busy and getting close to burnout, if not there already. And so I think part of it is sort of reconnecting to the things that we love and getting focused on those, and like turning off the busy. Like we have got to figure out how to turn off the busy, how to, work together to decide what maybe comes off the list, work together to decide who does what. But, and then also reconnecting with those things that light us up, that are fun, that are fabulous, maybe even the meaning and the why of what we do, because we cannot afford to be in a busy but bored state for a long period. That's just not good. And many of us have been doing that for quite some time.
Yeah. It makes me think about, I've had people who work for me before who come and say, you just have to know that when I get ready to go to this meeting, I feel anxiety, I'm stressed out, I hate this meeting. And my response is, okay, then we've got to fix that, because I do not want you to have a thing on your plate that you dread and hate. Yeah. That conversation of, so in that case, they're telling me, but this is kind of the first step of job crafting, which is like, who am I? What do I like? And what do I dread? Right? There's like understanding a self-reflection and an assessment of
Yeah.
what do I get really excited about, and what are the things where I'm like, when I know that's on my calendar for Wednesday, I'm just not happy.
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually in a meeting this morning talking to some folks, and one of the guys was saying, I love numbers. I love technical stuff. I love solving problems. And you could see the energy.
Yeah.
And then he was saying, over the last year, I've had to really learn how to talk to people about what they need. And I'm getting that skill. And at one level, super cool. He's excited about the skill he's learning, but his energy level changed completely.
Right. Right.
And so that's, I think, a conversation of that's really cool. You're gaining a new skill. Your job should be challenging. Your job should engage you. But if this is the part that energizes you, let's see if we can find some challenges in that space for you.
For sure. We talk about, I think about this with like Myers-Briggs, strong interest inventory, right? All of those assessments. And we talk about the difference between writing with your dominant hand and your non-dominant hand. And it's like writing with your dominant hand, write a signature. You don't think about it. It doesn't stress you out. It's nothing. It's like, yeah, okay, done. There are things though, when you write with your non-dominant hand where they are very challenging. And to your point, be challenged, right? That's one of the things you always tell me. Like, you want to be autonomous and you want to have challenge, but you can't live in a challenge state 40 hours a week. You will burn out. You'll be done.
Or why not have challenge in the spaces you like?
Right. Yeah, for
Like,
sure.
why not have challenge you're excited about? And maybe people even sometimes feel guilty about those challenges because it's so fun. Wouldn't that be cool?
Let's build a little more joy and enjoyment, right, into our jobs. So this idea of, you have kind of these three pieces. One is task crafting.
Right.
So I'm going to name them all, and then will you unpack them first? So we have task crafting.
Yep.
We have relational crafting, and then we have cognitive crafting. And these are basically three elements, three buckets that we can think about. These things exist in a job, and you can manipulate them in this job crafting process to fit what you love. So can you unpack those for us?
Yeah. And these come from that very original survey, or that very original study where they actually looked at people and how they were crafting. So if you think task crafting, it is the things you do. So when you're crafting, you're either adding things, taking away things, or changing how they're done. Concrete example for you, really boring, terrible tasks that you're not super excited about. Anytime you automate one of those, that is task crafting. I still got to get it done. I'm just not going to do it in that manual way that I don't like.
Yeah.
Are we not all doing that with AI right now? If you like
Listen, and thinking about that upstream, we have this with our developers all the time, where I'm like, you guys, there's a task that Rebecca has to do 72 times a year, and it takes her 3 hours. Can you please solve that for us one time? If you will put the time into it right now to fix that, we'll never have to think about it again. It's not going to be annoying, right? So in this case, you're saying do that for yourself. The things that you are like, every time I have to do this stupid thing, I hate it. Let's talk about then, how do you make that more automatic, more enjoyable, or offload it to somebody who's like, I love spreadsheets, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you can switch up a task, actually even discontinue a task, right? Like anything you can do in those areas. And on the flip side of it, if you love a task, where else can you use that skill to add value to your team, your job, your whatever, because you love doing that? How can we add more good ones, take more away, whatever we need to do? So that's,
I'm just thinking, Sherry, sometimes when we start at a school, when Ferris starts at a school, they tell me their tasks that they have to do to accomplish a goal, right? So I'm thinking about like advising or students who aren't registered or early alert or whatever. And they tell me, and then we send this email, and then we open this Excel spreadsheet, and then we call this person, and then we do this thing, and then we run a report, and then we like all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, can I please solve that for you?
yeah.
If we can make that more effective and efficient, you're going to have more time in your day to do the stuff you love, which is spend time with students. So I think it's especially relevant in that effective and efficient piece.
Yeah.
How do we use technology and other resources, right, to make that easier?
Like how many meetings can be an email?
Yeah.
Like that's a task, right?
In fact, I don't know if I told you, but a couple of years ago, we did a deep dive. We have deep dives in our company at once a month where we just pick a thing and somebody becomes an expert and talks about it. And we did it around emailing.
Yeah.
And how do you get really efficient? Like, what does your title say? And how do you bullet point? And how do you bold? So I don't have to read all of the stuff, right? The too long didn't read at the top.
Yes.
Those kind of things feel silly, but I will tell you, it makes a huge difference.
Yep.
Send me an email that I can understand in 2 seconds instead of all the stuff that you want to tell me, right? So
let alone they're easier to write and like less time writing them.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was task. The next one I think was relationships.
Mhm.
So relationships is about who could you connect with that might make something easier or more fun? Or if somebody's making something really hard, can you figure out a way around them or not include them? I mean, I hate to be blunt, but we all have those people,
For
right?
sure. Yeah.
So it is about building relationships that are going to change the job. I don't know about you. When I put together a team, there is a part of me that thinks about who would be fun to work with.
Yeah.
You know, how do I don't know, use those people in ways that make this work more fun for everybody.
It's a really good point about infusing energy based on the people that you're spending time with.
Yeah.
And I think we can even, so that's sort of a micro level of this relationship tasking where we're saying, who do I want to be with and who do I not want to be with? Just to be honest, right?
Yeah.
But also I think there's a part of this that is macro, which is, I think about Rachel Elam and Rebecca Green, who have done the same job. Z did it for a very long time, and then Rebecca took it over.
Yeah.
And what Rachel Elam would tell you is her client support, when she had days where she was having meetings every single day, she would end the day unhappy because she would just be like, I feel drained. I didn't get enough time to think through. I wanted to make sure I said the right thing and I'm exhausted. And so one time when I said to her, like, what do you need to thrive? She's like, I need to not have days where I'm having meetings all day long. And I'm like, yeah, for sure. That's just about where you get your energy. And I don't want you to end the day exhausted. Rebecca is coming from an institution where she's used to being with people all day long.
Okay.
And when I say to her, what do you need to thrive? She's like, I need more people, Rachel.
Okay.
I want to have meetings. I want to have phone calls. I want you to put my phone number everywhere. Like, awesome.
Right.
That is such a great example of the same job kind of tasks.
Yeah.
But a person being like, I get energy in this way and I get energy in this way. And I have to craft this job so that I have that. Right. So, yeah, I really love it. So let's see. We have a question, Sherry, from your friend, Joanna.
Yeah.
The
stack ranking your tasks. Is that a good idea? Absolutely. I mean, there are lots of tasks we hate. My mother used to say, 10% of your job is going to be dishwashing. Like it just is, right? And you can't hand off everything and you can't get rid of everything.
For
but
sure.
Man, there is something lovely about getting rid of some, particularly the worst. Or combining things. I'm going to spend an hour just getting this stuff off my plate so I can spend other hours on great things.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
I really like that idea. I don't know how your brain works, but I'm like, I can commit to misery for a certain amount of time, like in a day. You know what I mean? I can be like, I'm going to do an hour of a thing I hate. And then I don't want to hear about it for the rest of the week. So I think it is a really good idea to say, we're just going to articulate, we don't love this. And then put that in the drudgery hour. So that
I'm going to put on some fun music and I'm going to like do something so that I can get through.
For sure. It's a great question. Okay. Anything else about relationship crafting?
I don't think so. Let's do cognitive crafting because I think that's a fun one and it ties into meaning. So cognitive crafting is reframing how we think of a particular task or how we think of particular parts of our job. Sometimes what we have to do is not say, man, I have to write all these emails. We have to say, wow, I get to spend time communicating with my students and I'm going to make these messages whatever it needs to be. And so it's almost creating the meaning behind it or a mind shift so that I can do it better. I can deal with it better. It changes its value for me. I often use the example of my grandfather used to vacuum the living room all the time for my grandmother. And for him, it was about serving her. He didn't like vacuuming, but if it was serving her, and then he put patterns in the carpet, so it was fun. So like that's cognitive crafting. It's still vacuuming,
Right.
but
That's
he
right.
changed the meaning and he kind of changed the task a little bit.
It reminds me of when my daughter was very little and I just felt this burden of like, oh my gosh, every food that she eats, I have to give her. Like I'm making breakfasts and snacks and lunch and snacks and dinners and stuff, and and there was a point where I was like, this is every time I turn around, I have to feed this child. And I had to change the meaning and be like, first of all, it's not always going to be like this. This is a sweet time where I just get to be with her for all the meals, right? And then also I get to make her strong. I get to make her brain strong. I get to make her body strong. This is the way that I'm showing her love. Then when I was packing lunches, it was a totally different experience because I was like, this is a way that I am being a good mom and showing her that I love her, right? Same tasks, didn't change. What was happening in my brain and my value and my motivation for why I was doing that completely different. Changed the whole thing.
So I would say this is not about toxic positivity. I'm just like being great about it, but it's about sort of embracing something that is of value.
Yeah, for sure. I like the meaning behind the work. I think it is such an important piece. And I think we always have to balance. I mean, I'm glad you brought up toxic positivity because I think sometimes in higher education, we excel at that.
Right. We think that if we provide the meaning, then everybody will get on board. Not always.
Or that if it's really good work, we should be able to do it tirelessly without any complaints or any feeling of like, this is too much for me or those sorts of things. No. But I do think drawing a line between passions, one of the articles that you sent to me about this, I really loved it because it wasn't so much that the tasks change. You still have to write those emails. You still have to manage your people. You still have to check in with students. It was that every time I do those things, underneath that, I'm going to say, here's the value that I'm supporting. Here's the passion that I'm, using in this case. And it makes it a very different experience, which I really love. I've been thinking a lot about, how we arrange these things. Do you have a recommendation just in terms of what people actually do? I mean, is this just like evaluating what you love and then making a list of things and then saying which of these things can we move around? Or what does that look like pragmatically if I want to do some job crafting?
I'm going to, since Joanna's on here anyway, I'm going to channel my inner Joanna. I think this is about experimentation. You have to experiment. So yes, you have to think it through, and yes, you have to whatever.
Did you freeze?
Oh, did I?
Sorry, you froze for a second. You said, I think this is about experimentation.
I think this is about experimentation. You have to think through what you value. You have to think through where your pain points are. You have to think through those things, but how you solve them comes about by trying different things. Trying experiments and figuring out what works and celebrating those, trying other things. It is not an end. You're not going to find the perfect solution and get it perfect. You're going to have to keep working on it.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the fun.
For sure. And I think, in counseling, we talk about people getting in script. So whether it's in a relationship or it's just in your life where you're in your script and everybody knows, then you do this and then you do this and then they say this and then you do this. Mm-hmm. And part of the challenge is just do or say something different. It doesn't even matter. It's not about the thing that you're choosing to do different. It's about the fact that you've taken a step out of this well-worn path where we know what it's like and you come and you do these things and then you go home. It's that when you take a step to the side or the front or the back or whatever that looks like, now all of a sudden you have an unworn path in front of you that you can make what you want it to be. And sometimes you take a step to the side and then at the end of the day, you're like, I'm on the same path. That didn't go great. We're going to take a step to another side tomorrow, right? But the permission, I think, to say, I want to step off this path and the script that I know and just make some decisions about how I would like things to go differently is all about experimentation. Yes. And it's so much about the process and not as much about the outcome, right? We're going to have a different outcome just because we're doing something different. But the process of taking that step to the side, I think, is so valuable for people.
I like that frame. Thank you.
Yeah. One thing that I was thinking about, a challenge in this idea of job crafting, is I was thinking about like misaligned goals. So sometimes it is really difficult because you are like, this is what I want. And yet your job, sorry, is that's not what your job is.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know, Sherry, I always think about, in some cases, if you're very, very fortunate, you're at a place where it's about who's on the bus and not what they're doing on the bus.
Yeah.
But I don't think that everybody has that luxury.
No.
So I don't know. Do you have any advice for someone who's like, this is what my job description is and how I would like to craft my job? Those are going to be misaligned in the goals and the outcome.
Yeah, I think the question is, how much misalignment do you have, and how much then, as you said, sort of autonomy or privilege to make changes, right? And so I think if you have the job crafting, it's not a solution to an absolute mismatch or a toxic environment. It's just not.
Right.
So it is about, hey, I have this job. I think I told you the phrase I had heard: every job you should either earn or learn. So if you're in one of those jobs that you need to earn, which is totally fair, I know the feeling, can you also learn or craft small parts of it? Can you make different pieces better until you have other choices? Because yeah, we all deserve like to be in a place where we're doing good things that we value, that we believe in.
Yeah.
And so I think it is about sort of making the list of the things that you value, the pain points that you have, and starting to address some of those. But you're right. I mean, there are some things you can't hand off. You can't not do. You can't, like, you can't.
You know, I feel like I have to do a caution to our listeners here. It's similar to the caution that I would do for our freshmen coming in. They would do a session with their parents and we would talk about career, like, what do you want to do? And what are you interested in? And the parents would be like, can we take the assessment? And I'd be like, you can. But if you find out that you're in the wrong career or you should have picked something else, I can't help you with that. Right? So like, sorry, it's up to you. So my caution there is there's some part of us that does not assess our jobs sometimes. Because if we do, we will think, wow, I'm really miserable. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And that's a tool. Yeah. Sometimes you're like, I'm not in a place where I can actually assess what I'm doing, because I know if I do, I'm gonna be crazy about it. Yeah. But also, it is a part of life that you do every single day, where there is some bravery and privilege, to be honest, in saying, do I like what I'm doing, and do I have the freedom to make it more, to craft it to fit what I want to be doing with my day every day, right? And I don't think everybody has the luxury of that. And I think it's a little bit dangerous because, you know, you and I both had jobs where we're like, you know, I just have to assess if I like this job. And I realized I hate it. I don't want to do it anymore. Get me out of it. And that's a scary place to be, because then you have to take some action moving forward. The nice thing about assessing it is that perhaps instead of saying, I've got to dump the whole thing, you can then identify places in your job where you can craft it really to support you and the things that you love and the things that are important to you. So that's my caveat about this process. I think it's really, really valuable and important, but you have to be a little bit careful about it.
Well, and I think most of us have something that we like, or some things that we like. If we could grow those,
you're in a better position for sure. Well, I am going to, first of all, insist that I see a job description for my job, because when I started, there was only me and Matt, so we didn't write job descriptions.
Are you sure you want to do that? That's an assessment you might not want to enter into.
That's true. I want to see what everyone thinks I'm doing and then be like, here's what I'm actually doing. I'm positive that podcasts were not in my job description when I started 15 years ago. I'm positive that was not in there. So I think it's a really, really interesting thing to play around with. Yeah. And Sherry, I'm just thinking like not just jobs, but if you think about in your family, in your relationships, right?
Yeah.
With the things that you're passionate about, just how do we build passion and joy into what we do every day instead of being on that same, I just wake up and I do this thing without considering it. So it's a lovely process for us to dive into a little bit. Thank you for bringing that to our listeners. We are off next week, so we won't have a show. And then the week after that, we are going to be talking about our new book that explores curiosity. I'm going to be honest with everybody. I don't know what it is yet. So I think it's coming in the mail. And I will be an expert on it in 2 weeks. So thanks for joining me, friends. It's always a delight.